What's up, sons and daughters? It is Sam Jesse, and I'm here with good friend, Tech Sideline beat reporter for the Hokies baseball team, Chris Hirons. Chris, how are you doing, man?
Good, man. The allergies in Blacksburg, the pollen sucks, but we'll power through.
I was battling it earlier in the season. Chris, it is now your turn to carry the mantle in mankind's fight against pollen. Hokie baseball looking a little bit better than I think last time that we talked. The Hokies are now 24-14 on the season, 10-10 in the ACC. They are unranked nationally, sitting at number 43 in the D1 baseball RPI. And as of yesterday, I believe, they are currently in the NCAA tournament, according to D1 baseball. However, they are one of the last teams in the tournament. They're projected currently as a number 3 seed in the Morgantown regional, which would be a heck of a matchup for the Hokies to travel to Morgantown to face the West Virginia Mountaineers. Let's kind of talk about that real quick before we go and wrap up the Florida State series, in which the Hokies won that series 2-1. And then the Hokies finally won a midweek game again, a thrilling game against James Madison at home. I wouldn't say the Hokies are sitting pretty at all. I would say it's very bubblicious for the Hokies right now. But considering what they have left on the schedule, you feel pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you had earlier in the season, you had to go to Miami, you had to go to Pitt, which, I mean, not that Pitt's the toughest place to play, but like it was bad weather. The schedule really kind of wasn't in your favor early in the season, but now it's kind of creeping in Tech's favor. I mean, UNC's not playing great baseball right now. Clemson's hot, but I
Mhm.
think Clemson playing at Tech, that's something that Tech should win. And then the Wake Forest series will be interesting down in Winston Salem. But I mean, I think it was good that they kind of got back in the midweek win column against James Madison. Something they kind of struggled with the last 2 weeks. The loss against Liberty at home, and then the Radford loss, where really you should win those games. And that's, I think, right now is what's kind of hurting their RPI. You can't in baseball, you can't have that football mindset as a fan. You're like, oh, one bad loss kind of really tanks you. And it really doesn't, but you can't have too many of those bad losses to where, it really, really hurts your RPI. But the Radford one that hurt their RPI a little bit more than it should
Mhm.
have, a little bit more than what most losses would have. But I mean, they're on the bubble. They're in a lot better spot than they were 3-4 weeks ago. They're sitting 2-8 in the ACC against UVA. And still had 2 more games to play against the Cavaliers. But I think things are trending in the right direction for Tech, especially if that weekend at FSU.
Yeah, and you look at, James Madison is a team that kind of mid-major baseball program. They're sitting at number 128 in the RPI. They've moved up 26 spots over the last 7 days. So they're a team that's surging as well. The Hokies will play James Madison again, this time on the road in Harrisonburg. The Hokies also, again, have a home series versus North Carolina, which we'll preview at the end of the show. And they also have an away series at Clemson, as well as a road game at Liberty and the road series to end the season at number 2. I believe they're still number 2. Number 2,
Yeah.
number 3, they'll be somewhere there. Rake Forest, as they call it in Winston-Salem, and if for my money, I think one of the 2 or 3 top contenders for the national title this year. That's a Wake Forest team that's been building for the last couple years, and they are very, very talented. If you don't know who Bobby Wilkes is yet, you should, because he's freaking awesome. Uh, yeah, so I mean, Hokies, they're in a position to be in position, as John Rothstein would say, for college basketball. And considering how this season started in the ACC play, you're feeling pretty good. Breaking down the number 43 RPI, the Hokies are 4-7 against numbers 1 through 25. Those are games against Virginia, Duke, Miami, and Boston College. No games against number 26 through 50. Hokies are 11-5 against 51 through 100. That's Liberty, Georgia Tech, College of Charleston, Pittsburgh, Charlotte, Florida State. 6-1 versus 101 through 200. That's JMU, VMI, Bryant, and East Tennessee State. and 3-1 versus 200 plus. UMass Lowell and Radford are those two teams. So the Hokies have, like, I would say a majority of their schedule has been against pretty good competition. And I think we could see the RPIs for teams like College of Charleston and Charlotte and East Tennessee State, um, VMI and James Madison as well. Those are teams where their resume can get a little bit better, which will help the Hokies down the line. I think that, Charlotte had a tough start to the season, but they're playing pretty good baseball. So a lot of baseball to play. Hokies need to do well, but they're in position.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading on one of the message boards that Tech has no signature out of conference uh, wins this season, but I mean honestly that's not true. I mean, you have Charlotte. Charlotte has at least 3 or 4 major league prospects on that team.
Mm-hmm.
College of Charleston, the fact that they went on the road and they took 2 out of 3 after stumbling out of the gate on Friday. I thought that was a pretty big win, and then VMI on the road. I mean, VMI is a very, very good team, especially at home. I thought those are probably not that they're signature out of conference wins, but like those are solid out of conference victories.
Also, I would like you to point a college baseball team that plays in the SEC or the ACC that does schedule marquee non-conference games. We have enough. We're playing enough. There's two series left against top 25 teams. Okay, we schedule enough tough teams. We don't need any more. And then you also see, like, for those wondering, I think I tweeted this out, but midweek losses happen to the best programs. I think the night that Tech lost to Radford, LSU, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt all lost that night as well. They happen in college baseball. It's kind of part of the fun of the sport, the midweek madness. You basically get the first round of the NCAA tournament every Tuesday night. So you just embrace it, you move on. I think it was really good for the Hokies to get that win against JMU. It was also good for the Hokies, a 2-1 series win against Florida State. Not a very good Florida State team, but I will never complain about taking a series in Tallahassee. Let's start, Chris. Game 1, a 24-9 win. The Hokies were dominant. 17 hits, 7 extra base hits, 2 home runs by Brody Donay. And Chris, let's talk about Anthony Arguelles because he has come on strong in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, if Drew Hackenberg doesn't pitch a complete game on Saturday, which we'll get into, I think Arguelles, is a story that weekend. Tech's bullpen is pretty banged up, and we'll get into all the injuries in a minute. But the fact that he gave up 5 runs in his first 3 innings, and he comes back with a shutout, 4th, 5th, 6th, and then gets an out in the 7th. I thought that was pretty big, especially to save, essentially 3 or so innings from the bullpen. I thought that was probably the biggest story that weekend. You get an extra 9, 12 outs from your starting pitcher instead of having to dig into that bullpen. I mean, that was probably the biggest thing that came out of that Friday win. I mean, aside from scoring 24 runs, which is the most in an ACC game in program history.
Sorry, the mute button got me. Yeah, I've been really impressed. And also, this is a guy who's never started college baseball. He was a relief armor at Miami, and he's coming in now. And, throwing 6 and a third is no joke. And he's also, he's not over the last 2 games, ever his last 2 starts. We're looking at 10 and 2/3 innings, only 12 hits, only 2 walks in those. So you're looking at a guy who's like just over 1 whip over his last 2 starts against Georgia Tech, who's one of the better hitting teams in the ACC, and then on the road at Florida State, which, Florida State has some issues. Hitting isn't really one of them. Their issues are more of fielding and pitching. So really good for Anthony Arguelles. I think he's done a phenomenal job stepping up for this team, and they're going to need him, quite frankly, to continue to eat up innings, maybe even more than what he's done so far because of some injuries to the bullpen starters and, et cetera. Also in this game, we talked about Florida State's fielding is not up to their standards. 4 Florida State errors led to 5 unearned runs for the Hokies. It's kind of shocking to see Florida State playing as poorly this season as they are. They are in the midst of a coaching change. down in Tallahassee, but not what you'd expect from one of the premier programs in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that they're young. I mean, yeah, they had, I think, one of the best recruiting classes coming in, but I mean, Jack Hurley has said this a bunch of times to me, on TV. He said it's really hard to come in and play, in the ACC during your freshman year and do it at a high level. And FSU has some guys who are doing that, but to get 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that are young and can play at a high level in the ACC, I mean, that's pretty difficult to do. You look at Tech side, some of their freshmen um, at times have struggled, but you look at also the success of Brody Donay, Clay Grady, Andrew Sentlinger, just to name a few. That's pretty impressive as freshmen come in and be, really, really effective and kind of key members of the lineup or the bullpen.
Yeah, and what's crazy is, so for those who aren't aware of how the ACC tournament works, the last place team from each of the Atlantic and Coastal divisions does not make the tournament in Charlotte. And right now, Florida State at 5-16 in the conference is on life support. I don't think they're going to make the ACC tournament even, which is pretty shocking. What if I told you that Georgia Tech and Florida State wouldn't even make their conference tournament? That's how good the ACC is. And, every single year you have to be on your game in this conference. So surprising to see them. I know some popular podcasts picked them as like a sleeper pick to win the ACC this year, and they're 5-16. That's just how tough this conference is. Let's go to game 2, the Drew Hackenberg game. I feel like this is a recurring segment on the podcast now, that Drew Hackenberg was elite. I didn't even have to change that bullet point. Complete game, 9 innings, giving up 11 hits, but only 3 earned runs, 12 strikeouts to no walks on 116 pitches. 9 innings pitched and only in no walks is, I mean, bafflingly good. This dude
Yeah.
is on fire.
Yeah. I mean, you go back to his last 3 starts, I think he's thrown, 23 or so innings, and he's only allowed five earned runs, I think it is. You couldn't have asked him to pitch, as well as he has. And he said that, this is probably the best stretch. His last 3 starts, his 8-inning performance against Duke, and then his 6-inning shutout performance against Georgia Tech, and then obviously Florida State. He said this is probably the best stretch of his life, pitching wise. Which, the numbers indicate that. But to do it at such a time where Tech needs it, where the bats will sometimes go a little quiet. You're missing Griffin Green, who's could be done for the year. And then, again, a banged up bullpen. You kind of needed him to go 9 innings, especially with a bullpen game coming up on Sunday. He delivered just that. And we talked to him earlier this week, or on Tuesday, and he said, right before the 9th inning started, they kind of just looked, the entire team kind of looked at him, and they were like, "It's your game, man. Go out and finish it." And he did, even with the tying run on third base and the go-ahead run, or the winning run actually on second base. I thought that kind of just shows you the composure that he has, that he holds, especially as someone as young as him, a sophomore, and in a place like Tallahassee. And he said that was probably one of the loudest environments he had pitched in, especially that 9th inning.
Yeah, over his last 3 starts, so against Duke, Georgia Tech, and Florida State, 2 of those starts being on the road, mind you, he is up to 23 innings pitched, 21 hits, only allowing 4 earned runs and only 4 walks. He's had double-digit strikeouts in 3 games now. This guy's pitching at all ACC level. This is, I don't think you can say like that's what you expect from him, right? But we came into this and was like, yeah, he's that good. And to start this season, we saw a couple good performances, but then some performances there. Like, I think, Miami and Pitt both hit him a bit, and then we were like, oh, what's going on with Drew? What's going on with Drew? He's come back and pitched really, really well. And, I think not only is his MLB stock rising, but the stock of this team is rising, because if you can get a starter who can go 7, 8 innings in a start, that sets you up so well for the rest of the series. So Drew Hackenberg, man, hats off, pitching amazing. The Hokies will need him to keep pitching well, but he's off to a great start. Also, in game 2 of this series, Clay Grady, you mentioned him, freshman shortstop, who has been immensely impressive for the Hokies. He went 2 of 5, 2 RBIs in a run. I think, he's very, very good defensively, and I think he'll continue to get better offensively, but that was a really good day from him as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a guy who's going to be at Tech for 3 years. He can't do a Tanner Schobel where he's 21 during his sophomore season where he can leave early. So like, he'll be in Blacksburg for 2 more years after this one. And he's hitting at a high level right now, and I think really only there might be no ceiling for him. I mean, he's that good.
He really does remind you of Tanner Schobel as well too. Like, they're very classic shortstops where they're they're not the biggest guys. They're not the most imposing players out there, but he's just so good. And I think John Sheff, he's got to be. Yeah, how many times do you lose your star shortstop and then another one just pops up? So that's a huge win for the program.
Yeah, I mean his speed's a real game changer. I mean, he's had probably 3 or 4 base hits at least this year where he's kind of, it's been a little dinker to third base or shortstop, and he's legging that out. That's something that can extend innings, something that can, score a run with 2 outs. I think that's probably his biggest plus as a baseball player, not to mention the contact he has. The only difference between him and Schobel is that he doesn't have as much pop as Schobel, but
Mhm.
I mean, you'll still take, two hits, 2 singles on any day.
Couple of off seasons in the gym, we'll get that pop back. Game 3 for the Hokies was a 4-3 loss, a close game, a really tough loss because I think it was a bullpen day for the Hokies. The Hokies did not have Griffin Green as a third starter in this due to injury. Bullpen pitched really well, and you got to give them credit for going out there doing well. The bats the ball didn't find grass. One of those days for the Hokies. Hokies only got 5 hits. There was 3 hit by pitch, 6 walks, and 2 errors, and Tech just couldn't create a big inning there. And you kind of saw that as the game was going on. You were waiting for it to happen, and then the ninth, I think there was a pop up to end the game in the 9th inning, and it was over. And it was like, if this game went 10 innings, you think Tech maybe scores like 8 runs. Like, you were waiting for it, and it didn't happen for them.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those, baseball days where, you're hitting the ball hard. It's just not finding any grass. You walk a lot. You get a bunch of guys in scoring position, but it's just, it's not really going your way. But I thought Jonah Hurney pitched really, really well. His first collegiate start, gave up those 3 runs in 3 innings. And that's kind of all you're looking for. Get 3, 4, 5, 3 or 4 innings, out of your first pitcher that you throw out there. Especially on a Sunday in the ACC, and hopefully they can keep you in the ball game. Hopefully they don't put you 8 runs down or anything. And 3 runs, I thought that was really good, really, really a solid start for him. And then Jacob Exum, he's really turned the corner. He's been good. He shut out UVA in 4 or 5 innings during that Friday night game, and then he came in and the only run he allowed was on a bloop single. He almost got through 3 shutout innings, and then Matthew Siverling and Andrew Sentlinger, they threw, especially Sentlinger. He threw the ball well. Got the last out in the 7th with a runner in scoring position, and then in the 8th, just kind of overpowered FSU's bats.
Yeah, and again, look, we are going into this series saying, all right, it's a must-win series for the Hokies. We would love a sweep, but if you can win 2 of the games, you're feeling pretty good. That's what the Hokies did. They did it in tough circumstances as well. So I think overall, like, my thoughts on the FSU series, never going to complain about going to Tallahassee and winning the series. So good job by the Hokies. I think that's a winning weekend. Put yourself in a good position. That
Yeah,
being said, there's still work to do here. And, this is a tough conference, right? They play Clemson, who's just swept NC State. You have UNC, who's always a tough series. still work to do here for the Hokies, and I think you're going to have a lot. You're going to have a lot of games like Game 2 and Game 3 of this series that are really close. So overall, Chris, how do you feel about that Florida State series?
I mean, I don't think Tech's going to complain about going down to, you got the bus ride to Charlotte, and then you got the long flight to Tallahassee. I don't think they're going to complain about taking 2 or 3. Especially after they did that, especially after, they made kind of that same travel plan against Miami where they kind of got swept. They had leads late, but kind of coughed those up. But
Mhm.
anytime you can go down to Tallahassee and, take 2 or 3, no matter how bad FSU could be, 18-0 or 0-18 or 5-14, or wherever they were going in the series. I don't think Tech's gonna complain about that. Those are very passionate fans, no matter
Mhm.
how poorly that team's playing. So, I thought, for Tech, that's a pretty good weekend.
Yeah, that's one of the premier programs in college baseball. So to get a win on the road there always feels good. Midweek game against James Madison. Uh, I don't have a banner for this one, but that feels good. They got the monkey off their back. It was feels like right after I complimented them on the show about how good they've been in midweeks, they started to skid, but that's a win against a good JMU team.
Yeah, I mean, JMU's not. I mean, they're not a bad team by any means. I mean, it's a solid midweek opponent. They always are. But the fact that the team didn't give up after going down 5-3, in the seventh inning. I mean, especially in a midweek where it's kind of hard. There's not really a crowd there to create energy. I thought they did a great job. They had some good at bats in the bottom of the eighth where they scored 4 runs, come back and win from guys who had kind of sat all game. Brody Donay, he worked or he got hit by a pitch. Um, Before that, though, they had 2 outs, and Christian Martin kind of, flares one for a double that kind of just landed in a Bermuda triangle between the left fielder, third baseman, and shortstop. And that's kind of what started that rally. Brody Donay gets hit by a pitch, and then there's a few walks. Chris Canizero had a very, very good at bat. I mean, I think he only saw 4 or 5 pitches, but he worked a walk. That's hard to do as someone that kind of has sat for 8.5 or 7.5 innings to go and work that walk. And then the balk obviously scores one of the runs Tech needs, and I think it was Carson Jones's either game tying walk or he had the bases loaded, and it was a go ahead run walk, and then Clay Grady, mentioned his speed again, beats out an infield single to score another run. That was a pretty big insurance run because you're feeling pretty good up 2 in the ninth, sending Henry Weicker out there instead of just 1.
Yeah. So feel good. I think we've seen some midweeks like that. I remember in 2021, there was a midweek against VCU where it had a little bit more energy to the game. That was a good VCU team. The Hokies won on a Kevin Madden walk-off single. Uh,
Mhm.
it kind of reminded me of that, where it was a game the Hokies needed against a good in-state team. They came out with a W. So always feels good. They'll play JMU again. It's another opportunity to help the RPI, help the non-conference record. And that one again on the road in Harrisonburg in a few weeks. Alrighty, let's wrap up what we've seen. We won't spend too much time on this because there wasn't a lot of other games, but 3 things we loved from the past since the last show. So I guess Florida State series and JMU. Mine pretty easy. Took care of business at FSU. Got the midweek monkey off their back, and then Drew Hackenberg feels like the hack is back to ACC level pitching. He's been unreal. I think overall, this is a job well done in the past week for the Hokie baseball.
Yeah, I mean, 3 of the things I liked from Tech. I think Anthony Arguelles, the fact that he worked into the seventh inning against Florida State, gave you a good Friday start against Georgia Tech. I thought that was again the 2 biggest stories from the past 2 weekends is Anthony Arguelles really developing as someone who can go 6 innings. And then my second thing, Drew Hackenberg, back to where he was last year, kind of the guy who gives you 7 innings, saves you the bullpen on Saturday. Even when he was struggling, I say it with air quotes, he's not a guy that really gets like crushed when he's pitching poorly. It's a lot of awkward contact, soft contact where the ball just kind of finds a hole. And that's something that's a good problem to have if you're struggling like that, like you're not getting crushed. Because at some point some of those balls aren't going to find the hole. Um, and all that. And the third thing, I'll go the midweek monkey too. I mean, you and John Sheff said this after the Liberty game. Tech can't lose at home against Liberty. And then you can't go on the road and lose to Radford. A team that had lost 23 straight entering. That's just something that can't happen. And then they finally got the monkey off their back against JMU. Um, you know, Again, with the RPI, one loss isn't going to kill it, but you can't have too many of those bad losses to Liberty and JMU and Radford.
Yeah, I mean that's a really important win. The Hokies again, they'll have games against Marshall, Bowling Green, James Madison left on the schedule, and those are games where you don't want to throw the must-win label on them, but you almost want to throw the can't lose label on it. Like you got to, those midweek games they don't count awful much, but if you start to lose too many of them, you can't really make that back up in your resume. That bad loss will stick on there. So doing well in those games will be really important. I think it's mostly on the bats have to stay consistent, but also on a very young bullpen has to eat up some innings on those midweeks. So really important for the Hokies tournament hopes down the stretch. Something that needs to improve, Chris, my one thing is health needs to improve. The Hokies have been hit by the injury bug a bit here this year, especially on the pitching staff. On the field, I know, Carson DiMartini he's had as they call in the soccer world, a knock. So he's been DHing a bit more than straight up just playing third base. Jack Hurley got a pretty nasty hit by pitch on the hand. Hopefully that can heal up and he's all good to go. Pitching staff has had a little bit more on the, actual injured, not hurt side this year, which has been unfortunate because we said coming into this season, hey, if the bullpen stays healthy, that's a really good bullpen. Unfortunately, last few weeks just haven't been able to have the full arsenal there.
Yeah, I mean, I think health is, it's been Tech's biggest problem this year. And every team deals with injuries. Like, that's especially in a season like baseball, but it just feels like, or it seems like Tech, has kind of gotten bit harder than most teams by the injury bug. Their midweek starter coming this season, Ryan Kennedy, a talented freshman from Northern Virginia, hasn't pitched and he probably won't. He was dealing with, Chef went on the record to say he was dealing with an elbow injury after the ETSU game. He's just been dealing with that ever since. Carson DiMartini, hurt his shoulder when he dove in a second against Georgia Tech during that Friday game. He's been DHing, but a note on that, David Bryant stepping in for DiMartini at third base. There's not a huge drop off with the glove. I mean, both are elite level third basemen defensively, and then Bryant's bat has come around too. Hit for the cycle against FSU on Friday, hit 2 home runs in the Sunday game against Georgia Tech. He's started to figure out the ACC pitching and kind of learn this is what he needs to do to keep the team competitive, especially defensively. Henry Weicker and Kieran Higgins, they were both hurt. Chef went on the record to say that during the Pitt series, they were unavailable. So it's part of the reason why Tech dropped those two, the Friday and Sunday game late. Chris Canizero, he's been, he dealt with the bone bruise, especially against UVA. Christian Worley, Chef has said that he's done for the season. And then David Bryant too. I mean, he was banged up a little early in the season. I know Chef went on to say he was. Christian Martin was dealing with a hamstring thing too early. But I mean, that's just the injury bug, man. I mean, they haven't been able to get away from it, and that's probably the biggest downside of their season. Every team deals with it, but it just seems like Tech's kind of gotten hit with the injury bug. But Jack Hurley, he got hit by the pitch on Saturday during the Saturday game. The TV broadcast at FSU had said that they expect him to be back this weekend, and that he was only sitting on Tuesday for kind of precautionary measures. He was throw here. He was swinging the bat in the dugout on Tuesday, just kind of, just dry hacking. And then obviously Griffin Green. We'll see what happens there. He underwent an MRI on Monday, and the team expects that they'll know like what's going on with him this week.
Yeah, and the thing about pitchers, I mean, this is true for all of baseball, but it's almost you have to be so cautious with a pitching injury because if you send a guy out there who's not at 100%, you risk, potentially damaging the rest of their career. So you have to be so cautious with these guys, especially guys who do have a major league future or have an opportunity for a major league future. So I think you're put in a tough spot as a coach and as a training staff where other sports you can send a guy out who's 75+% and feel pretty good about it. With a pitcher, you can't really do that, right? You need them at 100% every single time they go out there. So tough for the Hokies. Hopefully they can get some guys back here in the next couple weeks. I think they'll need it, but we'll see. Alrighty. Player of the week. For me, this was a really fun one because this is one of the more exciting, and I mean exciting in terms of like really fun to watch play prospects that the Hokies have had. It's freshman catcher Brody Donay, who is, I think, maybe the most improved player from the start of the season to now that the Hokies have had. The freshman catcher, over the past week, he's hit 6 of 12 for 8 RBI and 5 runs. But I think the most impressive thing is defensively as a catcher, he has gotten so much better throughout a guy at Florida State. He looks really comfortable back there. I think Brody Donay has played his way into the everyday catcher position and really, really impressive stuff from the freshman.
Yeah, I think Donay is. I mean, you've seen it the past few weeks. He's been kind of the guy that they've opted to go to in the lineup at catcher for um, starting wise. You just can't take his bat out of the lineup is the thing. He's 6'5". When he gets in the box, typically even his like flyouts or pop outs, like third base, the exit velocity will be 95 miles an hour. I mean, he's someone that hits the ball hard. He's really kind of learned in the past few weeks to hit off speed pitching, which is something he kind of struggled with early in the year. But he looks like the real deal. This coaching staff was super, super high on him in the fall, and then coming into the year in the spring. And I mean, I think he's proven that the hype was real.
Yeah. I have in 14 games there. I don't know where that came from. I think that's from an old Jack Hurley one that I edited, but that's over the past 4 games for Brody Donay. Next up for the Hokies, a massive series. It always seems like for every sport for the Hokies, it comes down to something against North Carolina. The Hokies will host North Carolina this weekend. The Tar Heels sitting at 26-15, 9-10 in the ACC. And they're right there with the Hokies, number 47 in the RPI. Currently, D1 Baseball has the Tar Heels in their first 5 out, in the tournament. So this is a really big game, not only for the ACC Coastal standings and seeding going into that tournament, but also for the NCAA tournament. So really, really important series this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, North Carolina, they usually draws a big crowd to English Field, which always helps. Tech play well. You've seen it against UVA and then also against Georgia Tech. Those big crowds, have really really helped Tech create the energy that they needed. But the thing, they take 2 out of 3, and their RPI could jump 10 spots. That's just how weird the college baseball RPI is, kind of like the way that Ken Palm is. But I think if Tech wins 2 out of 3 this weekend, they sweep them. They've put themselves in a really really good spot heading into the Clemson series, and then heading into Bowling Green that weekend series during exam week, and then the ACC bye week is baseball calls it, and then Wake Forest.
Yeah, and then it's a North Carolina team that's very talented. Tyler Honeycutt is one of the best players in the ACC, the center fielder for UNC. UNC is kind of struggling a bit though. They are 1-5 in their last 2 ACC series against Miami and Boston College. Those are obviously 2 very good teams, but they're 1-5 in those last 6 games, and they haven't been super impressive in the midweeks either. So actually, they did beat UNC Wilmington 18-2 on the 25th. So I'll take that back. But it's a UNC team that's not playing their best baseball right now, and I think it's a really big opportunity for Virginia Tech. If they can take this series against UNC, I think they put themselves pretty squarely in the tournament at the moment. So big game. Hopefully it's an awesome crowd. I can't wait to watch. Uh, hopefully the Hokies can use that home crowd to their advantage, because I think, in the Georgia Tech series, that was a big deal. In the UVA series, especially, that was really big for the Hokies. So hopefully they can feed off the crowd's energy again. Any final thoughts, Chris, as we head into the home stretch of this season? Only 3 ACC series left for the Hokies.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long season. It's, kind of, winding down. I guess one thing I wanted to add was, I think, the turnaround for Tech, from where they were 2-8 a few weeks ago, I think that's probably the biggest story of the season. Um, now they're 2 games back of the Coastal Division lead. I mean, who knew that, that we'd be saying that, 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, they were talented. All they need to do was get healthy, and they've done that. Obviously, they've had a few guys kind of get hurt along the way, but they've gotten healthy, and they're. I think they're starting to prove they are who everyone kind of thought they are coming into the season.
Yep. So some big games left on the schedule, but the Hokies are, again, in position to be in position. Chris, as always, thank you so much. Best of luck in your battle against seasonal allergies. We fight in solidarity with you.
Thanks.
And yeah, let's hope for a good weekend here, and we'll be back next week.